It's clear to see that skills in Duel Links have changed a lot. It used to be that skills were an added perk on top of what your cards could do for themselves, but it seems like these days more and more skills become the backbone of a lot of strategies in the game. Where before we might get an attack buff once per turn on our board, now we have skills with 3 different effects that act as the very foundation for a lot of combos. What the hell happened to skills in Duel Links, and what does it mean for the game's future? The whole idea of skills as a whole has always been somewhat controversial in the Yu-Gi-Oh community as a whole. The whole idea that you are playing with something other than cards to many players of the physical card game make Duel Links seem like it wasn't real Yu-Gi-Oh. At the time, every character had a whole bunch of skills, and they weren't very restrictive, but they gave very specific bonuses, like attack bonuses, draw phase manipulation, and some weird and quirky ones that while you could build unique decks around them, they weren't generally more competitive in comparison to the more generically beneficial ones. The more powerful ones were Duel Standby, Restart, Destiny Draw, Balance, and Beatdown. Just like cards, while all might have their uses, the cream always rises to the top, so of course there was gonna be a skill meta, even if the decks playing them were gonna change over time. All of these skills ended up being too generic, and one way or another they got patched to be either less usable or less abusable, and now they're all pretty much unplayable in comparison to modern day skills. If you're a Duel Links player that has never played a TCG, this might seem like something that you want to come back to the game, just generically good skills that everybody can use. But if you are a TCG player, then this might seem a little bit familiar to you. In the early years of the TCG, the game was dominated by the most powerful cards, to the point that no matter what deck you were playing, a huge percentage of your deck had to be made up of these cards. There's a reason why so many of these cards got restricted in some way, and that's because they were too powerful for the game, and so generic that anybody can play them and win because of them. It really hurt deck building diversity, and the cards themselves being so broken had Konami thinking of how they can continue their game in a way that promoted deck building diversity. So they started making cards that were good, but they couldn't be played in every deck, the same way Duel Links is now making skills that are good, but that can't be played in every deck.
But in deck, you can't compare skills to cards. They aren't the same thing.
The thing is, man, skills are better than cards. They are like a super powerful card that you have guaranteed in your opening hand no matter what, that gives you a powerful ability you know that you'll have during the duel without even needing to draw into it. Skills are more reliable than cards because of that. If we are going to compare those old generic cards with these generic old skills, then let's also pretend that you could guarantee one of the powerful old staples as a bonus card in your opening hand. Imagine everybody could open up the game with a guaranteed Pot of Greed in your opening hand, a guaranteed Raigeki, a guaranteed Harpy's Feather Duster, a guaranteed Graceful Charity. These cards were already way too good back in the day. Being able to guarantee that they were in your opening hand and as a bonus card rather than replacing one of the cards that's already in your opening hand would be way too damn good, especially with everybody being able to play them. But that's not that far from what we had in Duel Links with these old skills. Duel Standby literally gave you a bonus card that allowed you to FTK your opponent during the early days of the game. Restart let you retry your opening hand if you didn't like it. Balance pretty much let you guarantee what your opening hand would look like, and Destiny Draw meant you could get exactly what you need in any top deck situation. And Beatdown let you attack for an absurd amount of damage every single turn. Literally everybody could use these skills no matter what deck they were playing. So then, it's fair game. Everybody can use them. And that was kinda true for a long time. These skills didn't really cause any issues, with the odd nerfing needing to happen here or there just to make it slightly weaker, but not making it less generic. The thing is, as the game goes on, the game gets stronger. It's only a natural part of any card game. If you want the new cards to be good, then they need to be able to compete against the cards that already exist. So gradually, the cards are going to get stronger and stronger. This leads to situations situations where these super generic skills were causing problem, making these decks unfair with how much they guaranteed something that would ordinarily never be guaranteed. And if Konami decided to nerf the deck, then these consistency skills could always find a way to ignore those nerfs. At some point it became too much and the consistency skills were nerfed into oblivion. But there were still more generic skills, and while they may have been overlooked in the past, new cards allowed them to be more usable. Like Sealed Tombs, for example, while it wasn't very good when it came out, the power creep of the game made graveyard strategies way better, so Sealed Tombs also got way better, and it didn't even have a life point cost, so you could pretty much turn your opponent's whole strategy off just by clicking a yellow button. Another example is Access Denied. It pretty much locked your opponent out of playing the game at all, but it had a heavy life point cost, but the more cards got added to the game, the more that life point cost could be achieved. Being able to stop your opponent from playing the game with your skill was way too generic and way too powerful. There were even skills that Konami intended to avoid being that generic, like the Cyber style skill that aimed to trade life points for fusion materials to go into Cyber and Dragon. That just ended up being free tribute fodder for tribute decks and free synchro fodder for synchro decks until that skill eventually got nerfed. There was a skill that could raise your monster's level augmentation that was intended to help synchro decks achieve the levels they needed for synchro summons, but it just ended up contributing to another way to lock the opponent out of their strategy too. There was this idea that skills were just something to slap on top of your deck, with your deck doing the heavy lifting and the skill just giving you some cool effect to make the duel more interesting. While for many decks this was true, there were too many situations where this wasn't true at all and the skills were just too generic and too powerful, and they were too dangerous to be left alive. At some point Konami shifted to making skills that were more deck specific, that way only one deck type could ever use that skill, so that if it ended up being too powerful, then nerfing the skill itself or nerfing the deck itself would be a good way to solve the problem. And generic skills they released after that were much more balanced, not giving you too much power. Konami had done deck specific skills in the past and they were solid but not too powerful, like the Toon Kingdom skill that let you put Toon World on your field at the start of the duel. You didn't have to actually play or activate Toon World if you wanted to play a Toon deck. Or the Cyber style skill, which while it was abused generically, it was eventually restricted so that you could only play it in a Cyber Dragon deck and allowed Cyber Dragon to get their fusion plays off easier. Skills that supported specific deck types allowed Konami a new way to support decks. The great miracle of Duel Links is since it started Yu-Gi-Oh! All over again from scratch in 2016, it allowed them to basically try again without making the same mistakes that the TCG and OCG made. So we never had to go through things like Pot of Greed and Chaos Emperor Dragon. And even better, we could have decks that were too weak on release on TCG, but released in Duel Links at a time that their power level was good enough to compete, like Red Eyes in Duel Links history was one of the strongest decks of all time. But in the TCG, it's never been a good deck at all. And Aliens in Duel Links was a really solid deck for a long time, but it was only alright for a short while in the TCG. They could keep doing this in Duel Links by having skills that make up for the shortcomings of archetypes that otherwise wouldn't be good enough. While Galaxy Eyes is famous in Duel Links history for being a whole deck entirely carried by a skill, the alternative to giving that skill would have been giving the actual Galaxy Photon support cards, which certainly would have been too powerful for Duel Links at the time, since that archetype can so easily play through interruption. Skills could also act as a way to give decks their support cards while locking those cards to the skill so that those cards couldn't be abused by other decks. If Phantom Knights got Fog Blade as an actual card, you better believe that any other deck that could use it would use it, but because of the fact that it was locked behind a skill that locked you into the archetype, only Phantom Knights got to use it. All of this is well and good, but it doesn't really explain why so many skills have so many effects that do so damn much for their deck types. Why does Yubel get to activate their skill 4 or 5 times in a turn? Why does BLS start with 7 cards in their grave? Why does Constellar get to ignore levels when it comes to Xyz summoning? Well, the answer to that is found when looking at what those decks do without those skills. If you take skills away from those decks, what exactly are you going to be doing? You're going to be doing absolutely nothing with them, because playing those decks would be incredibly unrewarding, since there wouldn't be any viable way to justify playing those cards. Yu-Gi-Oh! For its early years was first and foremost an anime and manga series, not designed with actual gameplay in mind, but storytelling and plot in mind. It doesn't matter whether summoning a vanilla with 3k attack is a -2 at best in the actual game, because in the show it actually meant something. It doesn't matter how hard Yubel is to get out in the game, because in the show it's meant to be difficult to use. These cards are utter garbage in the actual game. They are completely unplayable the way that they are. Because of that, you either have to build your deck entirely around getting them to work, when those supporting engines would probably be better off without trying to make up for the card's weaknesses, or you could just act like those cards don't exist at all. If you're a competitive TCG player, that probably doesn't matter to you. It doesn't really matter which deck types are worth playing, because there will always be deck types worth playing, and if you just focus on those, then you'll be having a good time with decks that function successfully. In Duel Links, before skills really supported decks like that, it was pretty much the same. Whatever deck was best, regardless of skills, was likely going to be among the best, and very rarely would a skill factor into a deck's overall success. Like Fur Hires could use Beatdown to beat over big monsters, but apart from that, the deck itself functioned on its own back. Just like the TCG, the cards themselves decided what was going to be the meta, and of course, just like the TCG, as time goes on and cards get better, decks get more complicated, and they get stronger when it comes to the power that they can put out. But Duel Links is not the TCG, it isn't the OCG, and it damn sure isn't Master Duel. It's not just going to lock you into playing decks that were good in those games, because it's already got a legacy of bringing decks that were bad in paper Yu-Gi-Oh! Into the forefront of competitive Duel Links to give them their chance to shine. Now with all of these deck-specific skills, decks that were utter trash get to actually be good, and to convince you just how shitty these decks would be without skills, I'm going to show you a compilation of what you can accomplish on turn 1 with these kinds of decks if you don't let them have their skills.
Look, damn, I'm tripping. I feel like this can't go right. On me. No, I ain't dissing, I'm speaking my mind, but I know that this ain't so right. Oh, God. How are you passing the torch to me, but you niggas ain't make no lights? Literally punching my way in the game, and you niggas ain't take no fights. You niggas ain't break those heights, ain't sharing, you niggas ain't bring no likes, ain't caring, you niggas ain't gain my rights, don't hate, cause if it ain't no day, no light. Oh, God. If it ain't no pay, go hike. Oh, God. They say I'm a stray, I bite like, this is my way, my might. Have a good day, alright? Back in the day, I would tell him to bag back, but you probably reject that. Word to the rebel, bro, you can just have that. That ain't even what I'm mad at. The way that you speaking, I feel like you act that. I'm accomplishing half that. Oh, I'm Michaela, that bitch with the fat back. I'ma need you to snap back. You say I won't make it, but you couldn't make it to 30 with food that you grab at. You mad at me rapping, I'm mad that McDonald's be using your ass like a lab rat. These bitches be snapping at me, but be mad at the dog when I wanna just snap back. Are these niggas tripping or dissing or missing the fact that I've been here since day one. I've been here since day one. Fuck that shit that you want, this that shit that they want. I'm like Thanos with shit. I start snapping, they gone. I don't be planning for shit. I just spam when I'm on. I've been here.
As you can see, these decks are all completely ass, maybe possible at best, but really bad against the plethora of interruptions that are common these days, and not putting up anything that constitutes a competitive board in the modern state of the game. The point is that Konami refused to give most of these decks design choices that they actually needed to even be worth playing, and Duel Links wasn't just gonna sit there and let these cards do nothing and act as pack filler, literally whole decks as pack filler. They decided that they would do what Konami refused to do and actually support these decks in a way that would actually work. How many times do you see a Blue Eyes support card being released that doesn't do jack shit or fuck all for the actual Blue Eyes deck? Duel Links somehow found a way to make those cards worth using in Battle Chronicle. How the hell are you going to play through a single interruption in zombies when you need to throw everything in grave, but everything that throws everything in grave is hella negatable, and you don't even got a way to dump cards from hand to grave? How are you supposed to summon Destiny Hero's boss monster when the archetype doesn't even search for fusion spells? These decks would be literally unplayable without these skills to fix their blinding design flaws. So in some form or another, these skills do need to be here to validate us getting these cards and to support all of the people that are fans of these themes that would otherwise be unable to enjoy the game the way they want to enjoy it because of how badly the TCG and OCG designed so many decks. You might even agree with me already. The decks that are poorly designed do need skills to make up for what those decks lack, but the fact still remains that some of these skills just have too many effects and they do way too much. Like the Ubel skill, just by having Ubel in hand you get to activate it 4 times. That's pretty crazy, right? Just activating a skill 4 times when back in the day you might only activate your skill once. Looking at it that way, it's pretty absurd, right? But let me give you another perspective. Live Twins normal summons 1 monster, special summons a monster from the deck, uses them to link summon, uses that link monster to revive a monster, uses those 2 for a link summon, uses the link to revive the other link, and then uses both links for another link. This isn't that insane of a combo. This is one of the shorter combos that you can do in Duel Links these days, but look, it took 7 steps in total and it gave you a card draw. It could have given you card destruction, and it gave you interruption, as well as a solid grind game all by itself. 1 card giving you all of that. Now we look at Ubel. You normal summon the Ubel, send it to the grave to summon the next Ubel, send that one to the grave to summon the next Ubel, then you use the skill to give you a search. It gives you a monster that doesn't die by battle, but dies by everything else, and doesn't have any interruptions, and it could give you a follow-up play into Neos, or a fusion play in contact or super poly, which super poly could be an interruption if your hand was also good enough to get a hero fusion on the field. The point is that Live Twins did 7 actions and accomplished more than Duel did in only 4 actions, yet Live Twins isn't scolded for the amount of actions it's taking, while Duel is being scolded for the actions it's taking because of the fact that they're doing it with a skill. What does it matter if you accomplished what you're doing with cards or with skills? It's not like you can't interact with the Duel skill. The fact that the skill sets the Duels means that they have to flip summon them, meaning that you get to interact with them just the same as if they were being summoned by any other way. Blackluster Soldier getting to start with 7 cards in their grave. If it were any other deck starting with that much setup already in your grave, it would be absolutely disgusting. But BLS is such a poorly designed archetype that is what Duel Links felt it needed in order for that deck to be playable. And they were right about that. BLS without the skill does absolutely nothing, but maybe they could accomplish the same thing with less than 7 cards in grave, you know? Well, the thing is that Duel Links is actually a 2-player game, and by having 7 cards in grave, it allows the BLS player to have a little bit more options when it comes to the way that they are playing their game, so they can actually fight back against the opponent's cards that might shut off their strategy. Even then, a DD Crow, a Lancia, or an Abyss Dweller is still something that BLS can't do anything against, even with a free 7 cards in their grave. When we look at a deck-specific skill, I think we shouldn't be looking at how much the skill does in general, but how much those things benefit the deck that it's for. In many other decks, putting 7 cards into the grave would be way too broken, but for an archetype as bad as BLS, it's just fine. It's not that big of a deal. For a more meta-relevant example, Shiranui and Mayakashi both have skills that make him good enough to compete in the meta right now as 2 of the best decks in the game. I think that a lot of people feel that because a deck's skill is good enough to take it to meta status, that means the skill is too good. I don't really like this way of thinking, because that just means that a skill should never be a part of what makes a deck competitive. If that's the case, then why does Duel Links even have skills in the first place? Why should Duel Links even have skills if they don't even matter? If you don't want skills to matter, then to be honest, Duel Links is not the game for you, because even before deck-specific skills were so common, this game had a pretty big focus on skills. Maybe you're fine with skills giving the decks the support they need, but you don't like how much text they have, or how many effects they have. To that, I would say that a quick glance at cards in the game will show you the exact same pattern. Cards from back in the day, on average, had less text than they do now, and that's for more than one reason. Cards having multiple effects also makes cards stronger, meaning that it's a natural progression that we should expect when a game has power creep. And if you don't like power creep, Yu-Gi-Oh as a whole probably isn't the game for you. Maybe you should go into a game like Magic Standard or Hearthstone where they have set rotation. This mirrors the fact that skills have more effects as well, and with more effects there will come more text. It's only natural that skills would follow the power creep so that the decks they support can compete against decks that don't need skills like Live Twins, Tenyi, and S-Force. Cards may get more effects these days, but they also tend to have more restrictions placed on them so that they are more locked into their decks, while old cards might be more usable in a lot of decks because they're weaker. New cards are often only used in decks they were made for, just so that their effects can't be abused in other decks. It's the same for skills. The skills made for deck types almost always have some kind of restriction placed on them so that there are things you aren't allowed to do in your deck. Like in Red Eyes, you can do what you like with your extra deck, but when it comes to everything else, you can only special summon Red Eyes monsters. This is naturally going to increase the amount of text a skill has, and it needs to be specific in the wording so that players know how the restriction works, even if they fuck that up sometimes. The restrictions that they place on skills also act as kind of a balancing mechanism a lot of the time. For example, one of the best trap cards in the game is Ice Dragon's Prison, and it's so powerful, in fact, that many duelists believe it never should have been added to the game in the first place. Graveyard and field removal in the same card that ignores most forms of protection is just too much for a lot of decks, so Duel Links has made it so that most skills won't let you special summon outside of your deck specific theme, meaning that if you aren't playing against somebody playing the same theme as you, then you won't be able to activate Ice Dragon's Prison. This way, without even nerfing Ice Dragon's Prison, they've made it so that less decks are able to play it because those decks just really need their skills in order to play. By having skills act as a balancing mechanism, by making them too good for those decks not to play, Konami has another way of keeping the game balanced. I'm not gonna sit here and act like Duel Links has perfect skill design. I know that the Tachyon skill happened, I know that the Speed Droid skill happened, I know that the Odd Eye skill happened. These were all pushed a bit too hard, making the decks that they were played in way too good, but I don't think that overpowered skills existence is a good argument to hate on all skills in general. You know what happened to all of those skills? They got nerfed, and now they're either fair or underwhelming. Broken cards happen all the time too, but nobody is campaigning for cards to stop being made. Those are the things we play with, but just the same way we play with skills too. Broken cards get hit, and broken skills get hit. There's this meme where some decks are just yellow button decks that all they need to do to win is just click the skill button. I feel like there are definitely decks that do a decent amount of their plays using their skill, but I also feel like there are decks that set up a winning situation just by activating their card. And I'm thinking, does it really matter which button is being clicked if there is any button at all that causes a win? Like, is U-Bell really more of a win button than Ice Dragon's Prison? I just feel like if the skill is what is letting you playing your deck and your deck would suck otherwise, then you should forgive that skill for existing. Like, what the hell was Konami smoking, thinking that Spectral Sword Engrave shouldn't be able to use its effect until the turn after it's sent there? That means it's basically never going to activate, bro. That's way too long to wait. Letting us using on turn 1 was only natural, and giving us the ability to search for a monster is pretty much giving us the consistency every other deck already has anyway. I could really keep it going for all the other decks that are carried by their skill, and this really explains why the decks that don't have skills for themselves don't have skills for themselves, because those decks just don't need them. I just want to say, guys, thanks for sitting through my infernal yapping. This is just a side of the discussion that I feel is a bit underrepresented in the community right now, so I wanted to put it out there. But I want to know, how do you guys feel about the state of skills and Duel Links right now? Do you like the way it used to be? Are you happy with the way things are now? Let us know down below in the comments, and if you want to see more videos like these, be sure to slap like now, subscribe if you haven't already, hit the bell to get notified every time we make a new video. Have yourselves a good one, guys, and I've been Undead from Team 6K, signing out.
Hey, why they gotta hate on me? I done got me 250,000 views and they still saying they low key. They ain't wanna come work with the kid, but I'm flexing with Zay on beats. How they ask for a spot at the gym, but they leave all the weight on me. I don't ask them to wait on me. They would ask where they gon' be with a song if they wanted the weatherman. I ain't asking to pay no fees. She was homeless and needed a spot. I ain't ask her to pay no lease. I ain't ask her to say no please. I ain't ask her to make no cheese. Scream fake, but it ain't on me. Got clean so it ain't no streets. Why green if it ain't no keeps? Brought cream so it ain't no beef. My team say it ain't no chief. My demon, they hang on me. They seemingly ain't no peace. I seen him, he ain't no beast. For